Well, the United States was a big focus on the last day of the Liberal cabinet retreat in Halifax. The government says they're confident they can work with either the Democrats or Republicans after the November election. All this comes down amid speculation over Justin Trudeau's future as Prime Minister, despite a year of bad polling and calls for a major party reset. So how will the upcoming U.S. election affect Canada's trade policy, and how will this affect Canada's own elections that are coming up next year? Let's bring in Martin Patriquin. Martin is the Quebec correspondent for The Logic, joining us from Montreal. Martin, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So what are you watching here? Because we were talking about sort of what's happening on the United States side. The Canada-U.S. relations was a big conversation in the last day of the retreat in Halifax. With that U.S. election now just a couple of months away, what are you anticipating? What kind of changes might we see coming around this presidential election?
I mean, fundamentally, you know, in a certain respect, there's not a whole lot of difference between what the Justin Trudeau government of the Donald Trump era went through and what he went through with the Joe Biden era, and what he would go through with the Kamala Harris. It's actually pretty simple. You know, both presidents are protectionist. They have protectionist desires. They have America first ideals, that sort of thing. We saw it very clearly with Donald Trump. We saw it very clearly with Joe Biden. The difference, I think, is going to be chaos, is managing chaos. Look, if Mr. Trump wins, you have to deal with protectionism, but you also have to deal with almost psychotic whimsy. The fact that he sort of, acts very, very rashly and does things sort of categorically. I'll remind people, for example, he was the one that said, tried to stop steel imports from Canada on national security grounds. He's the guy that listened to a few farmers in Minnesota, and all of a sudden, we had a problem with Canadian supply management when it came to milk and other such products. And lo and behold, we were rewriting NAFTA. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing that really gums up relations, protectionism or not.
You mentioned NAFTA, that bilateral agreement that's coming up for renewal, or I guess renegotiation, if you will, in 2026. So we'll be well into what kind of government we're going to have here in Canada and what they're going to have in the United States. Painting a picture here, what if we're dealing with Pierre Poilievre and I guess perhaps a Donald Trump?
You know, I don't think there's that much different. I think, everything with Trump comes down to personality. I'm fairly certain that he has thrown a fair bit of shade at Mr. Trudeau, as we all know, over the last 9 years. I have a feeling that personality-wise, he might get along better with Poilievre. But fundamentally, Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Trudeau are governing the same populace that is extremely reliant on trade with America in order to keep the economy going. So it might come down to a little bit of personality, but fundamentally, the fundamentals are exactly the same with the two.
What about Kamala Harris? Well, the polls show that she and Donald Trump are pretty much neck and neck. What about factoring that in?
Look, I mean, I think, if you go back to 2015, Mr. Trudeau built a government to basically have a Hillary Clinton presidency. That was what they were anticipating. That's what they wanted, obviously. I think it's very similar in this situation. I think that they would much, much rather have a Kamala Harris government in place for reasons discussed before, for reasons of sanity, let's be perfectly honest. Right. And also, they're probably more simpatico when it comes to, non-economic issues, things on, abortion rights and that kind of thing. Much more simpatico. And look, when you have a trade situation like this, as it is in America, like the best thing in the world that you can have between two countries is a lack of drama. And I think there'll be a lot less drama between the two countries if Kamala Harris becomes president.
Well, we are seeing drama that's happening within the Liberal Party, a lot of drama that's happening around our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And there's a lot of calls in terms of, members of the party looking for shifts within the party, real action from the Prime Minister. Talk to me about that as he now looks at what's going to be happening south of the border, to what needs to happen within his own Liberal Party as they prepare for an election next year.
There's two things. Look, there's two things. There's one's good. One could potentially be good for Mr. Trudeau. One's going to be bad. The first I'm going to say is that inflation has been sort of wrangled in. It looks like interest rates are going to continue falling. They're certainly falling. They're going to fall in the United States, and we, not to say that we're always in lockstep with the United States, but fiscally we generally are when it comes to interest rates. That's the good side of things, because that means every time someone goes out and buys gas, somebody goes out and buys groceries, buys big ticket items, all that kind of thing, it's going to be cheaper. It's less easy. It's harder for Mr. Poilievre to come out and say, Canada is broken when things are measurably better than they were 3 years ago. The issue he's going to have is housing. Look, I mean, we heard everybody in the cabinet retreat, or the caucus retreat, in Halifax, talking about the importance of housing and everything like this. And it's great, sure, talk about housing. They've been talking about it for 10 years. I because I do these kinds of things, I looked at all the electoral platforms from the last three elections, starting in 2015. They were talking about housing. It's mentioned 25 times in the 2015 platform. We're going to build new housing. We're going to do all this. They didn't do anything until they got caught. And when they got caught, now they're panicking. And the problem with housing is that it's not something that you can turn around in a year. And that's the area where I think that it is going to be a very, very sort of sore point for the Liberals, and a big point of attack for the Poilievre Conservatives.
A hot button issue indeed, as we've been seeing it for the past decade. Martin, thank you so much for this. Quebec correspondent for The Logic, Martin Patriquin from Montreal.